The Miami Hurricanes stay scorching hot on the recruiting trail. They just landed their second receiver in 3 days, and the Canes have surged into the top recruiting class in the ACC, from the 704 to the 305. Tyran Evans, welcome to the U.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, post-game host on the Miami Hurricanes radio network, and co-host of Locked On ACC. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. On this episode of Locked On Canes, we're going to talk about the crystal ball predictions that are out there. Busy time of year in recruiting. Miami's on a heater, as you know. There are some crystal ball predictions, notably in Miami's favor, but there are some for Miami targets that are going in different directions now. And on that note, the Georgia Bulldogs are fighting back. We know in this recruiting cycle, Miami has already beaten UGA for some really important targets, including the number one player in the country. But Georgia is counterpunching now in a big way. But let's talk about the latest player that Miami just landed. And you now make that 4 days in a row that the Hurricanes have landed players. 5 verbal commits in a 4-day period. I'm trying to enjoy my vacation in Italy, but Miami is keeping me so busy. But you know what? I love being busy, and I love to talk about Tyran Evans, the 4-star wide receiver out of Hough High School in North Carolina that the Hurricanes just landed on Wednesday night. 6'4", 200 pounds. I love everything about this player physically, and I'm also told he's got insane work ethic. Like, you have to beg this guy to get off the field and stop practicing. He has that sort of alpha football mentality. When I started to learn about Tyran Evans, and he's now a 4-star recruit in some places, still a 3-star in others, I was kind of wondering, like, what am I missing here? Why is this player not ranked higher than he is? He really just surged in his junior season. 36 receptions for 980 yards, 14 touchdown receptions, 27.2 average yards per catch. And that's the thing. Watching that 6'4", 200-pound frame of Tyran Evans, not only is he really physical, and he's got moves to make defenders miss. It's a mismatch nightmare. But he's also got some speed to create separation, to get open downfield. I mean, as evidenced by that 27.2 yards per catch. So, again, watching this guy, I was kind of wondering, and of course, obviously, Tennessee and other schools in the SEC saw enough in him for him to be a former Tennessee commit, but I was kind of wondering, why is this player not ranked even higher than he is? He's someone who's got a ton of upside, has really continued to grow and fill out physically, and just had the breakout junior season. But again, there's a lot to love when you watch Tyran Evans, and Miami ultimately beats out Tennessee and North Carolina State, the home state school. The Wolfpack was trying to make a surge for him late. And, I know that in the case of Evans, this is a player who is formally committed to the Volunteers up until a couple weeks ago. Right after officially visiting Miami, he decommitted from Tennessee. And so there was, about 10 to 14 days where he was uncommitted, and then he commits to Miami after not only a really successful official visit a couple of weekends ago, but then he actually followed up and made an unofficial visit the following weekend. He wanted to see Miami again, which I'm sure is when he ultimately decided this is definitely the place for me. So I know the Tennessee fans are going to watch this and be like, hold on, he wasn't a flip. He wasn't a flip because he wasn't committed nowhere before he chose Miami. He was, though. I mean, it wasn't like a direct, I'm changing my commitment from Tennessee to Miami, but he's a former Tennessee commit. I'm going to call it a flip. I'm going to call Tyran Evans a flip, even though there was a period of time for, about a week and a half, 2 weeks, where he was not technically committed anywhere. I'm going to call this one a flip. big framed playmaker. He has route running savvy, ability to adjust and snag the ball out of the air. And again, he's very violent to and through competitive contact, I'm told. He's beloved by Miami staff. I call him 6'4". He's listed 6'3.5" at some other places, but he's in that range, 200 plus pounds with the physicality. A really important body type for this class of 2026. I mean, Miami, of course, in the class of 2025, they got that body type with Josh Moore, who Miami flipped from Florida. Big physical receiver. You want to have, at least in my opinion, you want to have at least one of those in every single class, because the other receiver that Miami has landed, which was a big time get in Vance Spafford, one of the top receivers in the country, a top 70 player who Miami flipped from UGA. He's got the smaller body type, around 5'11". So you like to have the big physical body type, because some other targets out there, big guys like Calvin Russell and Tristan Keys, a lot of competition for them. Cannot guarantee that either of them is going to be a Miami Hurricane. So Miami has gotten a really good one who can play at a high level in Tyran Evans. Here's what he told On3 Sports after his official visit to Miami on what stands out about the U. Coach Cristobal, Coach Beard, the staff, the school, the tradition, the amount of players they put into the NFL, he said. Shout out to Kevin Beard, Miami's receivers coach, because, up until 3 days ago, Miami didn't have any receivers currently committed in the class. And I see what folks are saying out there in my mentions and on message boards, like, hey, is there a problem with KB? Did he forget how to recruit? Do players not want to play for Beard anymore? And then he goes on this 72-hour heater where he flips Vance Spafford, and I'm going to call it a flip for Tyran Evans. Miami's also trending very well for Jason Lopez from Chaminade. We'll talk more about him, but Kevin Beard is on a really good run right now, and I certainly respect it. A couple of more comments from Tyran Evans. He said, being around Coach Cristobal, Coach Beard, Coach Shannon Dawson, Dennis Smith, D-Train, and literally everyone else on staff, he said, of the highlights, and seeing more of Miami, he said. So, as mentioned, former Tennessee commit. He also had offers from South Carolina, Florida, Florida State, North Carolina, and NC State. So Miami did a great job landing Tyran Evans. And all right, we'll talk about where this puts Miami's recruiting class, because, the Canes are moving on up. But UGA is fighting back. They've got some Miami recruits in jeopardy. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. Miami lands another verbal commit. I'm over here talking about it in Italy and having a great time, and we're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, I love Monarch Money, and I've had to tighten the budget, right? Because even though for a lot of the time I'm spending overseas, I do have a place to stay because I have family over here. It's still expensive to spend 6 weeks in Europe, believe me. And if you ever wished your managing of your money felt easier, with Monarch Money, it can. I've been using the heck out of Monarch Money. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase or a big trip, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. For example, one of the ways that I saved money was the hotel that I'm in right now has no air conditioning, which is surprisingly common in Europe. So if you guys see me sweating, because there's no AC in my room, but you know what? I'm saving that money and I am budgeting smarter. Guys, Monarch is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And guys, Monarch helps me track my expenses, like streaming services. I had way too many of them. Some of them I didn't use. I was paying way too much for all this stuff. Monarch helps you budget smarter, and it helps you manage your wealth. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for half off your first year. Thank you to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. If you want to take your everydayer experience to the next level, guys, even when I'm over in Europe, I'm giving you guys the 411 on everything going on with the Canes. We drop Donno balls for all the recent Miami Hurricanes commits, predictions for when these guys are going to come in. We told you about Tyran Evans, that Miami was in a really good position for him. So sign up. Click the link in the show description below to become a Locked On Canes insider. You can try it free for 14 days. You get text messages directly from my phone to yours. Try it free, and then if you like it, after 2 weeks, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. Give you a lot of added value on there on the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. Click the link below. Here's where Miami stands now in recruiting. And we'll start with the wide receiver position after a busy week already. Miami landed 4-star Vance Spafford on Monday, 4-star Tyran Evans on Wednesday. That was after landing Israel Briggs, 4-star tight end on Tuesday. So it's been a busy week for pass catchers. In terms of receiver, I feel really good about Jason Lopez, who just visited this past weekend, 4-star wideout from Chaminade Madonna. I think there's a good chance, in my opinion, he's going to end up being the third receiver in this class. He's got a ton of athletic upside, a really productive player in high school. He's also a productive basketball player. And Jason Lopez, if he does ultimately land at Miami, is going to play both basketball and football. He's got the offer from Jay Lucas as well for the Hoops team. So I think Miami's in a really good spot to land at least 3 receivers in the class, with Spafford and now Evans verbally locked in. I think Jason Lopez, there's a good chance he's going to end up being the next. And Miami is still heavily recruiting and possibly fighting uphill for a couple of 5-star big-bodied standouts in Tristan Keys and Calvin Russell. And you know what's crazy? For some reason, a lot of the big name wide receivers in high school in South Florida just end up wanting to leave the area. Like, he who will not be named, JJ, from a couple of years ago, a couple of cycles ago. But a lot of people maybe feel like that's the case for Calvin Russell from Miami Northwestern, that he seems like he's probably trending more to LSU at this time than Miami. We're a little over a week away, about 9 days away from Calvin Russell's verbal commitment. Now, it's not necessarily going to be over on July 5th, his birthday, when he makes an announcement. An announcement may not be the announcement for him, but whoever he commits to is going to have a huge advantage on that day. And most of the trend seems to be for LSU, even over Miami for Calvin Russell. So it's strange, but I honestly feel like, at least in terms of the sentiment and the buzz, Miami might have a better chance right now at Tristan Keys, who is not a South Florida kid, Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and he's a current verbal commit to LSU. A lot of schools have been putting in an effort to try and flip him. Now, again, the battle rages on for Tristan Keys because Tennessee really wants him, Texas A&M really wants him, Miami, of course, and he's been verbally committed to LSU since back in March, so you could perceive LSU as being the slight leader in his recruitment for that reason. But I know that there's definitely some confidence coming out of Coral Gables in Tristan Keys, and I think Miami is going to keep pushing there until the very end for him. Keys, he may still be in South Florida right now. He's been in South Florida this week for a 7-on-7 tournament. Now, this is a dead period, so he can't go and visit Miami. I mean, he can't stop him from stepping on campus and walking around, but you can't currently do visits right now because of the dead period. But Tristan Keys happens to be in town right now, so he's soaking up that South Florida lifestyle, and maybe a little more time spent in Miami might convince him this is the place for him to play. So that's what's still happening at wide receiver after Miami has landed Tyran Evans. In terms of the big picture now, so Miami and landing Evans, they move up a spot to number 6 in the 24/7 Sports Composite rankings. So you're inching closer towards top 5. And I think the most significant thing about the upwards move that Miami just made is they have passed Clemson. They leapfrogged Clemson, who was right in front of Miami. Now, there's a long way to go. And there are actually some players Miami is recruiting, like Bryce Perry Wright on the defensive line and Blake Stewart in the defensive backfield, who are actually predicted to pick Clemson over Miami. Obviously, Miami's going to land some other really good players, but it's a long way from over. But Miami right now is trending for the top class in the ACC. And if they can do that, it'd be the 4th straight year. 2023, 24, 25 cycles. Miami had the top class in the entire ACC. 2 out of those 3 years had the top class in Florida. The Gators actually, snuck one in last year. Miami's going to try and finish ahead of them this coming cycle. But Miami is trying for the top class in the ACC again. They move up a spot to number 6. So here's how the class composite looks right now on 24/7 Sports. USC, who's got 30 guys committed somehow, they have the number 1 class at this moment. Texas A&M at number 2. Notre Dame 3rd. Georgia 4th. Ohio State 5. Miami 6. Clemson at 7. Penn State 8. Florida State, they've made a lot of moves lately, at number 9. And Texas at number 10. All right, folks, let's talk about UGA. So far, this has been the school that Miami's had a ton of battles with, right? I mean, very notably, Miami beat Georgia back in May for number 1 recruit in America, Jackson Cantwell, 5-star offensive tackle, which was a big surprise to a lot of people because right up until a couple of hours before his commitment, Georgia was the trending leader. Jackson Cantwell was very polarizing, Miami beating Georgia for him. That was a huge dub for Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal. Miami scored another dub earlier this week, flipping high-level 4-star receiver, the aforementioned Vance Spafford from Georgia's class. But, Kirby Smart, he's got a little more fight in him than Mike Norvell and Billy Napier, because even though Mario Cristobal, he stuffed Kirby Smart in the locker, Kirby is wriggling his way out of that locker. He's obviously tough to beat on the recruiting trail. So, Georgia got a nice win yesterday, although this is not all bad for Miami, folks. But Georgia officially landed a verbal commitment from running back Jae Lamar out of Colquitt County, Georgia. Now, that you call that a dub over Miami because Hurricanes had him on campus recently for an official visit. There were even some Miami predictions to land Lamar. Miami was ahead of Georgia. At least the perception was that for several weeks, and Georgia pulls this one off. So that's the good news for UGA. But the good news for Miami is there could be a Derrek Cooper domino. So Georgia and Miami have both been fighting for a couple of the same running back recruits. Lamar is one of them, but most of us would argue that Derrek Cooper out of Chaminade Madonna, 4-star, borderline 5-star, depending on where you look, running back out of South Florida, that he's the bigger prize. Miami and Georgia have also been fighting for him. So if there is the domino effect, and I think there very well could be, that with Georgia landing Lamar makes them a little less likely to land Cooper, who's been trending more in Miami's direction, you potentially take that as a positive. And by the way, Miami seems to have been surging for Cooper for longer than Jae Lamar has been committed to Georgia. That just happened yesterday. Miami seems to have been surging with Cooper for a couple of weeks. But I will warn you that a Georgia insider, Jeremy Johnson from On3 Sports, he actually yesterday dropped an RPM prediction in Georgia's favor for Derrek Cooper. So, I mean, some Miami fans saw that. They just landed Jae Lamar, who they beat Miami for, and now they're trending for Derrek Cooper as well. Cue the panic and hysteria, because that's how some Miami folks are feeling. But listen, as far as that prediction for Cooper, the buzz around that, from what I understand is, and I know, folks like Stephen Wagner from Kane Sport at On3 was saying this, that the buzz around that On3 prediction is that it's probably a little bit of a reach on that reporter's part, but it's still worth noting, right? Because most of what the connected individuals, the individuals who are even more, connected than I am, have been saying about Cooper in recent weeks up until today has been that it really does seem like Miami's been surging there. So that Georgia RPM, not saying it's wrong, seemed a little bit out of left field, but it's something worth noting. Now, I think a lot more significant than that prediction are predictions in Georgia's favor to land top defensive tackle James Johnson. Now, those predictions were not from some regional Georgia reporter. Those predictions for James Johnson to land at UGA that were logged yesterday were from Chad Simmons and Steve Wiltfong, two of the top national guys at On3 Sports. I take those a lot more seriously. Not to say that they're always right. I mean, Wilt Fong thought Jackson Cantwell was going to go to Georgia until right before he went to Miami. I'm not saying they're always right, but I think those are significant predictions. And I would be a little bit concerned because, and you can't win them all, folks, but Miami has put in a lot of energy and has really, to this point, prioritized James Johnson, who, he's not really a South Floridian. He was in Fort Myers, just transferred to Northwestern. So he's going to play his senior season at Miami Northwestern. But if he ends up picking Georgia, that's a significant L, right? Because this is a player, we really wanted. I really wanted. I think Miami really wants James Johnson, top-rated defensive tackle in the class of 2026. So if Miami cannot land JJ, then that is a significant loss. I mean, if Miami does end up beating Georgia for Cooper and beats Georgia for Spafford and Cantwell, I'd say Miami comes out pretty well in these tug of wars overall. But losing James Johnson would be significant because there are some really good defensive tackles in this class, but it's not the deepest. So if you lose out on James Johnson, it's going to be really difficult here. Now, Miami has landed Tyson Bacon, who we really like and the staff really likes. Miami is trending for 3-star defensive tackle Freddie Wilson. He's certainly not the blue chipper that James Johnson is, but a nice player. Miami is still recruiting Lamar Brown, who's one of the top defensive tackles in the class. It seems like there's been a little less Miami buzz recently. LSU and Texas A&M are also very much in the mix for him. He's deciding on July 10th. Miami has also been recruiting defensive tackle Bryce Perry Wright, but he's been trending to Clemson. That's where the predictions are right now. And as far as James Johnson goes, for better or for worse, we're not going to have to wait too long because he's locked in a June 28th announcement. And again, of course, nothing's official until National Signing Day, but in around 48 hours, James Johnson is going to make a prediction, and the crystal balls are in Georgia's favor right now. Speaking of crystal balls, we'll talk about some more of those when we come back. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiette Ready. Rugiette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal and brain boost and blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiette might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. So head to rugiette.com/lockedoncollege and use code LockedOnCollege for 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege and use promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiette website for full safety information. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. For your next listen, make sure you check out our very good friend Brian Smith. He hosts The Portal on the Locked On Network. The Portal podcast not only discusses transfer portal, NIL, recruiting, which is very busy this time of year. And Brian Smith does an impeccable job. So make sure you check out The Portal wherever you get your podcasts, and also free on YouTube. Speaking of players we hope Miami will land, Miami's offensive line class, it's a masterpiece, right? I mean, this is going to end up, even if you don't land anybody else, this might already be the best O-line class in Mario Cristobal recruiting history, which is saying a lot. But Miami still is recruiting the top interior offensive lineman from IMG Academy, who I found out earlier today. Apparently, I've been, and I think all of us have been pronouncing this dude's last name wrong for months or years even. So I was and shout out to my guys, D Money and Pete Ariz at Canes Insight. Yeah, I was, while I was traveling in Italy, I was watching their stream like worldwide. I was watching those guys talking recruiting on Canes Insight, and then I hear D Money is talking about how it's not College, it's College. I think he said Breck College. So I'm never going to get used to saying that, but to Breck College, I apologize. I've been saying your name wrong for probably over a year. Like it was over a year ago, I think, the first time we talked about him on Locked On Canes, who, is someone that Miami and Georgia are really battling for, the interior offensive lineman out of IMG Academy, who he would be the cherry on top of an incredible offensive line class already from Miami. So that is someone to watch out for, certainly in this class. There are some crystal balls of players who could announce in the near future. Tight end Zachary Turner is someone that Miami is strongly expected to land, he's the Elijah Lofton of this class is what he appears to be. Miami already just landed a really good, taller, lankier tight end in Israel Briggs, who we broke down a couple of days ago. I guess that was yesterday's episode. We broke down the Briggs edition. Miami often likes to take multiple tight ends in a class. They're looking to take 2 again this year. Zach Turner could be the Lofton of this class, and Israel Briggs would be like the Elijah Arroyo of this class. I think the two of them complement each other very well, and we'll see if tight end U can get another one. And by the way, I had some comments. I noticed I'm all about these recruiting rivalries. I guess because we're recruiting so many of the same players these days, I've noticed a lot more UGA fans in our Locked On Canes comments, which is great. You guys want to come in, talk some trash, do what you got to do, man. I don't mind it, but I had some Georgia fan in the comments yesterday saying, Don, why do you keep calling Miami tight end U? Georgia is tight end U. Maybe that's what they say in SEC country, but bros, the Miami fans stand up for the U on this one. They have been calling Miami tight end U for decades, from Bubba Franks to Jeremy Shockey to, I know we don't really like to talk about Kellen Winslow Jr. these days because he's in prison for a very long time. But Miami has been tight end U, Brevin Jordan, a bunch of other guys, Clive Walford. Like Miami has been tight end U for decades. Not saying Georgia hasn't had good tight ends, but Miami has had that tight end U moniker for a really, really long time. Do not try to take that away from us. You can take Jae Lamar away from us, but you cannot take tight end U away from us. And hopefully we can take Derrek Cooper away from you in the near future. Cooper, by the way, I mentioned he's got a decision coming up. July 12th is the decision day that Coop has set. Miami, Georgia, and Ohio State being among the top schools for him. Miami having the most buzz recently, although a UGA reporter did recently put in a crystal ball. So I mentioned crystal balls out there. Zachary Turner is one of them. He could decide, I think, in the near future. Jason Lopez, J-Rock, standout receiver from Chaminade Madonna. Miami's got crystal balls out for him. Defensive lineman Freddie Wilson, who, I guess if things do not break very well for Miami with some of the other players that they're after, you could be looking at Tyson Bacon and Freddie Wilson maybe being the 2 defensive tackles. I want at least 3 personally. Like I want at least 3 defensive tackles, but we like where we stand for Freddie Wilson and Derrek Cooper. Miami does have some open crystal balls to land him, as we mentioned. So those are some of the crystal balls that are out there for Miami targets. And folks, again, I know I'm really excited for Tyran Evans, who Miami just landed, the 4-star receiver out of North Carolina. I know the staff is really excited about him. Again, he not only has that physicality and the proven ability, just had a breakout junior high school season on the field, but they also love his work ethic and his dedication to football. So sounds to me like Tyran Evans is going to be a great culture fit at Miami. And, hopefully the Hurricanes can continue this run because, again, 4 straight days from was it 4 straight or 5 straight days? Was it Sunday through Wednesday? Miami landed at least 1 player each of those days, including 2 recruits in one night So 5 in the last 4 days, Miami has landed. We'll see if Mario Cristobal can continue the heater. And again, people have told me if Miami stays hot on the trail, they're not going to let me re-enter the United States. I mean, there was somebody who DM'd me because everyone knows when Donno is on vacation, Miami does really well on the recruiting trail. They crush it when I'm out of town. When I'm out of the country, it's at another level. So I had someone who I think works for like Customs and Border Patrol who DM'd me and said, I'm going to pull some strings in the government and you're not going to be allowed back in until Miami has secured the number 1 class. So Mario's got some work to do because as much as I love Europe, guys, I'm getting fat. Or like I can't stay over here forever. Like because all I'm doing, I'm eating all the pasta. I'm spending all my money. I do walk a lot more out here and I sweat because there's no air conditioning in my room, but I am getting a little homesick. I got 2 weeks left in my trip and I'm going to want to come back to Florida. I'm going to want to come back to Miami. So, Mario's got some work to do on the trail. Otherwise, I'm going to be exiled from the United States. So, guys, make sure you smash the like button and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.